Thank you very much, Steve. And well, we continue with that big story of the year. It seems the year 2022 is going to be the biggest story this year, as investors are keeping a close eye on what the outcomes of the ANC NEC meeting could be today. And of course, in the National Assembly, this comes as the rand took a knock last week with speculation surrounding the future of President Cyril Ramaphosa. So why are investors so scared about what the future holds for the president? For that and more, we are joined by the former CEO of Goldman Sachs in sub-Saharan Africa, and an investor himself, Colin Coleman, to weigh in on what the Phala Phala scandal means for investors both locally and internationally. Mr. Coleman, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. What went through your mind when you found out the panel's report and its recommendations, or its findings rather, as they pertain to the president as far as Phala Phala robbery is concerned?
Thanks, Alani. So it reminded me of 3 warnings that I gave some weeks back about the coming events in South Africa. The first warning was that the December ANC conference is a dangerous moment for South Africa. And if the wheels come off, a wave of criminalization of the losing faction could be unleashed and democratic processes in South Africa compromised in future. The second warning was that the merging of criminal and political patronage networks against the backdrop of taxi violence, stripping of our infrastructure, attacks on Eskom, so on and so forth, will crowd out legitimate business activities and lead to a step down in investment, taxes, and jobs in South Africa. And the combination, thirdly, of an unhinged ruling party and rampant criminalization of the economy could bring devastating consequences to South Africans. So away from the specifics of Phala Phala, I think that South Africa is in a very dangerous moment. We've also got the pending release of Wallace for the killing of Chris Hani and the potential return to jail of President Zuma. These are a combination that could produce a perfect storm. So I believe South Africans need to look after, firstly, the stabilization of the country, the stabilization of the economy, and we need cool heads from all quarters to do this.
Mr. Coleman, you work with the local and international investors. Political turmoil is never a good thing for investors. Why is that? Why are they so scared?
Well, they're not really scared. They're just risk managers, meaning they don't bet on outcomes. They look at the probability-weighted outcomes and they say, what is the scenarios that will unfold? They don't like this kind of uncertainty because they don't know what the potential outcomes are going to be. And it does put South Africa in what we call a higher beta or higher volatility space. So with that, the cost of capital goes up, and with the cost of capital, the returns for investors go down. So either they get a higher return or they look elsewhere. Now, fortunately, South Africa has very liquid capital markets. So our equity, our currency, and our bond markets are really shock absorbers in this type of situation because the rand will move up and down, or the equities and the bonds, and you've seen it very, very actively over the last few days. So they absorb these shocks and they allow the investors to come in and get out. And that is one of the good things about South Africa from a global investor point of view.
Could there be something else that's good that could come out of this? Because one looks at how many organizations around the world, including ratings agencies, they have spoken about how good our institutions are. If you are forcing a president to resign or to step aside, doesn't that show that our institutions are quite strong, if that is possible in a democracy like South Africa?
Yeah, that's like writing poetry while the country's in flames. You know, it feels nice, but you don't want the country in flames. So I think that the reality is that we in South Africa, want to we want to get to a position of stability. We want this country to stabilize. I think certainly what all the investors want to see is an environment in which the reforms that the president has been talking about are implemented. So there's a lot of talk, not a lot of action on implementation of reforms, and we need that modernization. And I've been saying for a while that we probably need some kind of political rupture in order for those reforms to take place. We don't want the rupture in the wrong direction. We want a pro-inclusive growth and pro-constitutional reforms to take place. Now, one of the potential outcomes here is that we could see the response of the population calling for social democratic non-racial alternatives to the ANC to rise, because if the ANC doesn't actually address the issues of unemployment, inequality, non-racialism in this country, then they no longer are relevant to the future of South Africa's problems, and some other alternative could rise. So that is what I think some people are watching for, is what political solutions or alternatives are there if the ANC itself is unable to rise to the occasion.
Let's say that tomorrow he survives what happens in Parliament, and then he survives the ANC elective conference. What does it say about this particular scandal still hanging above his head throughout the first term into the 2024 elections?
Yeah, I mean, I think that only the president is in a position to judge his legal case, because he knows the exact circumstances. And so one will have to see how this evolves. But you don't want, and certainly the investment community doesn't want hanging over South Africa's head this uncertainty that is going to take months, potentially years to resolve. And we want to be able to get beyond what Christo Wiese, referred to the former ShopRite chairman as us shooting ourselves in the foot. I think that's very apt. These are not global problems. These are self-inflicted problems, and we need to get over them.
Colin Coleman is an investor and a former CEO of Goldman Sachs. Thank you very much for your time.